The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us today, my Lectora people. It's great to have you here for this Inspiration Wednesday webinar. It is a little after 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is when we're slated to start. So I am going to give everybody a minute or two to make sure that they're connected via audio and video. If you wouldn't mind letting me know in the questions panel whether or not you can hear my voice and see my screen, and if I need to change my audio settings at all, like my volume, I greatly appreciate that. In the GoToWebinar panel, you should be able to find the questions panel. Thank you guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ooh, you guys are nice and responsive today. I'm super excited. I'm going to be asking you lots of questions. So hopefully you are as excited as I am to listen in about SCORM. And we're going to be talking about the basics and beyond. Do. You should be seeing my instance of Lectora online. I'm currently in the Chrome browser working on my course. We're going to do this live in real time as we go through our SCORM checklist. Awesome. Cool. All right, let's not waste too much time. Let's go ahead and get started, and hopefully anybody that joins is going to be able to keep up. We're going to go through a couple informational pieces here for you as we begin. So first off, a couple of housekeeping items for those of you joining us in the live webinar. This will also be recorded as well. All attendees are on mute. That's just to ensure good audio quality as we're going throughout the session. If you want to, you can hide the GoToWebinar panel using the orange arrow in order to minimize the amount of screen real estate that it's taking up. If you think of anything as we're going along, go ahead and type your questions into the questions panel in GoToWebinar, and I'll be happy to answer them either on the fly, or we'll definitely try and leave a good chunk of time at the very end to make sure that we are going through and answering all of those as the best we can. So this session is being recorded. For those of you who registered, you will receive a link to the recording, or I can't remember if it's a link or an attachment, one of the two, within 24 hours after this live session, so you can go ahead and watch it again. And for those of you who are not able to attend us with the live session but are watching the recording later, hey, hope you enjoy this as much as everybody here is going to as we go throughout the live. So I did kind of make this into a quote-unquote e-learning course as well as a presentation for you here today. And that's because my intention for this is to share it with you so that if you would like to use this as a teaching opportunity at your organization, you're more than welcome to do so. You would want to go through and maybe scrub up some things, take off our logo and add your own, but by all means, I'm going to make this open and available to anyone who would like to use it. Our general goal for this particular webinar is to discuss the basics of SCORM. We're going to deep dive into the technical standard being used in e-learning, and we'll discuss some practical applications of SCORM as well. So how does SCORM work in Lectora and Lectora Online? That's going to be one of our really big questions that we answer here today. Also, what is the future of SCORM going to look like? Perfect timing. One of the questions that came through is, are you going to cover XAPI? Well, that would definitely be what the future looks like. So we'll be talking about XAPI and CMI5 and how that integrates into what you're currently doing. For those of you who are not familiar with my lovely voice, my name is Jennifer Valley. I'm the community manager and synchronous trainer at Trivantis. I've been here for about the last 3 years. So happy to see a lot of my previous students that are in the attendance list. Glad that you were able to join us, as well as my community members as well. Shameless plug, because I am the community manager If you wouldn't mind going over to community.trivantis.com and joining us over there, we'd greatly appreciate having you. Lots of resources, and you can sign up to participate in forums and groups, read articles, watch videos, lots of fun stuff to do over there. Before joining Trivantis, I actually worked as an e-learning developer, instructional designer, and translation administrator. So in all, I'm coming at you with a little over 8 years of experience using Lectora and Lectora Online. So hopefully that relates into some good, healthy advice that I'm able to give you. Fun facts about me is I'm kind of a crazy animal lover. I have 27 pets in my house, including a dog, some fish, frogs, lizards, and shrimp as well. And I'm also a Michigander. So if you hear my voice and you're like, man, does she sound Canadian? It's not my fault. We're just too close. If you'd like to participate in this conversation, feel free to go ahead and at us at Twitter. The handle is @Lectora. And if you wouldn't mind using the hashtag Inspiration Wednesday, we would like to hear that what your feedback was for today's session. What did you learn? What is something you think other people in the industry should know? And we'll be checking on those after the session here today. I don't have any horses. And 27 does mean I am counting each fish individually. I have a fish tank and my boyfriend has a fish tank. And I even went as far as to name all of my fish. All of my fish have Harry Potter references. So yes, I do count them each individually because they each bring me great joy as I get to look at them in their lovely little tank that they have. Thank you so much for asking me to repeat or share the community URL that is available in the questions panel. It's community.trivantis.com. Greatly appreciate it. So, what are we planning on doing in this course? Well, our objectives is to have an understanding of what SCORM is and to be able to successfully turn SCORM on. We'll definitely go through that process. We're also going to look at some of the things that need to be done to your courses if they're not done already, to make sure that they are SCORM compliant. And that includes creating an object with an exit title close window action, as well as being able to identify the requirements within your course associated to SCORM. We're going to talk about the process of autonomously choosing the correct path when working with a course with or without a test, and be able to successfully manipulate and show those AICC and SCORM variables that are in Lectora. We'll look at publishing the SCORM compliant content from Lectora Online, and I'll give you a basic understanding of how to upload your course into your learning management system. There are so many on the market here today that it's kind of hard to catch every single last caveat that you could come across, but I'll definitely give you some tips and tricks and things to think about. So the audience is intended for you, essentially any instructional designer or e-learning developer looking to create a SCORM compliant content. And I'm hoping that in between our little ramp up here and the questions at the end of the session, actually going through the course is going to take about 45 minutes. We are going to actively turn this course from a standard title, which is what it's set as now, to one that is ready for SCORM and AICC as we go through this information. And we need to have a passing score of 100. So I'll be asking you guys some questions as we're going throughout the session as well. So one of the questions that came in is the information presented going to take into account any non-Lectora environments? No. The principles that we're going to be talking about and the things that you would want to keep into consideration as far as what SCORM is and the things that you would need to keep in mind. The base knowledge is going to be translatable over any authoring tool that you're using, but the actual process, which is going to be sandwiched right in the middle of our conversation, is going to be Lectora based. And then when we go to talk about the future, that'll again apply to any authoring tool on the market. So there is a little bit of a Lectora focus for us here today, but we will be talking about the process in general. Before I do that, I wanted to ask you a couple quick questions for anybody that's on the call. So I'm going to go ahead and propose out a poll. Out of curiosity, I'm interested in knowing, are you currently using one of our products, Lectora Publisher, Inspire, or Lectora Online? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that out to you. And if you wouldn't mind answering it for me, it just helps me understand what kind of audience I'm working with here today. There are varying answers from yes, definitely we have a license, cool, to no, and that's perfectly fine. Again, this will speak a lot to all of the authoring tools on the market, but the steps that we'll need to be taking in order to switch our current course over is going to be Lectora Online and specifically Trivantis based. So I'll leave that open for just a little while longer. Greatly appreciate your participation. Still have people voting. As expected, the majority of people who are responding are either have Lectora as their primary tool or one in their tool belt. So great to have you with us. We're sitting stagnant around 80%, so I'm going to go ahead and close that up. Hurry up if you haven't had a chance to answer. And thank you so much for participating with me. I'm also going to ask you if you are currently creating Lectora or any other authoring tool-based content, what is the current standard that you're using? Are you using SCORM 1.2, 2004, AICC, XAPI, or just straight HTML? Thank you so much for voting. Got a lot of responses coming through. Yay! Thank you so much. I'm going to leave it open for a little while longer. There is still people voting. If you have not had a chance to do so, please go ahead and click on one of the radio buttons attached to the answer for this question. All right, we're running stagnant again. I'm going to go ahead and close it up. If you have not got the answers, feel free to, or answered this yet, feel free to go ahead and do so. Hurry up. All right, closing in 3, 2, 1. Thank you guys so much. Greatly appreciate it. I am going to share this information to you because I kind of had an idea that the majority of you were using SCORM 1.2. So guess what my content is framed around? SCORM 1.2, woohoo! That is not surprising at all. SCORM 1.2 seems to be the one that has the most adoption, I should say, in the e-learning industry, and especially with Lectora users, which the majority of you are. SCORM 2004 coming in as far as SCORM-related content in there as a close second, which is something that I would think would happen. I was a little bit surprised, I'm not going to lie, about the HTML results being more than SCORM. I understand the idea of publishing it out and having it posted on web pages, which is cool. Just didn't realize that so many of you guys were doing it on top of, something else. That's cool. All right, and for the 2% of you who are talking about XAPI, look at you being future forward. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit. So thank you so much for participating. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the nitty-gritty of, let's start with the very basic, what is SCORM? So SCORM is an acronym. It stands for the Shareable Content Object Reference Model. It's a mouthful. And once you kind of understand it, it's one that can be a little bit focused and repeatable. According to SCORM.com, SCORM is a set of technical standards for e-learning products. Essentially, back in the day, there was a lot of different standards that were established that people were using in order to get their courses into learning management systems or other types of housing locations. And one day, a group of people decided that they wanted to come together and come up with more of a standard. Bring together all of those things that were working and were currently in play into one thing that they could actually work with. And they called it SCORM. Essentially, SCORM provides you with a communication method and a data model that allows e-learning content LMSs to work together. So what exactly does that mean if we break it down? The communication method is essentially the way that your e-learning product, which for further definition, it refers to a generalized term of software such as authoring tools that are able to create web-based content for learning purposes, i.e. Lectora Online. And so they are going to come in and they're going to have a communication method in between the two programs in some way, shape, or form. And they're going to share data in between the two. And the data would be modeled in some way, shape, or form to make it so that there would be a standard. So what it all breaks down into is a communication of data from one tool to another that has been standardized. So with that being said, I'm going to reach out over into our first knowledge check question, and I'm going to ask you to participate as a poll. Go ahead and help me answer this question. There are more answers that on the screen than they are on the poll, so lucky for you. It's going to be a little bit easier. Please select all that apply to fill in the 3 pieces of missing information. SCORM is a set of what for e-learning products? It provides what and what that allow e-learning content and LMSs to work together. Go ahead and participate. Help me out here. We need to get 100% in order for it to mark correctly in our learning management system. Thank you in the questions field for the clarification. I was trying to take a step back from like the literal definition of SCORM, but it was the DoD that was implementing SCORM, and it was mostly military based to begin with, and then it turned into more of an overarching standard. So thank you for that clarification. I kind of just said people, and I didn't go into actually giving credit where credit was potentially due. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close this up and share the results with you. You'll be happy to know that you got it right. The answers are, well, no, did you get it right? SCORM is a set of technical standards, so that is definitely an answer that we need to have selected. For e-learning products, it provides the communication method, beautiful, and data models. Ooh, we got it. Okay, cool. I'm trying to really squint and see the bars, and that yellow is not doing me any justice. That allow e-learning content and LMSs to work together. That is the correct answer. Thank you so much for participating. Greatly appreciate it. I'll bring you back into my screen again. I did mark your answers for you, and we'll be able to move on. So in order to understand SCORM, it is a very technical thing that you need to kind of go through, and I'm definitely not going to be going through every single aspect of it, but I essentially wanted to hit the highlights for you. So this is our highlight reel. When we're talking about SCORM, some of the important things that you need to know is it's been around since 1999. That is when the standard was first kind of given a version and assimilated out into the audience. And it has gone through multiple iterations with different versionings and different things that have been added and expanded upon. It started with SCORM 1.0. It then went into 1.1, 1.2, which the majority of you are using, and then finally landed on 2004. 2004 has gone through a couple different versions as well. They're called editions. There's the first edition, second edition, third edition, and fourth edition. For any of you on the call who are curious, Lectora and Lectora Online comply with 2004 third edition SCORM. We are going to, like I said, be focusing on 1.2, but the thing to note here is that from 99 until 2009, there was continual progress. The last version of SCORM 2004, which was the 4th edition, was released out into the internets essentially in 2009. As we're going through and we're learning more about SCORM, we need to also understand that SCORM compliant courses communicate with an LMS. Again, it's a communication method by using JavaScript, and it's being done so using an API adapter. So for those of you who are looking to really be able to do a lot of different things with SCORM, a good idea is to also get yourself well versed in JavaScript. I'm not even going to pretend like I know all that much about it. I would recommend going out onto the web, javascript.com, LinkedIn Learning, your local college base, and learning from them to really understand how that communication works. But essentially that API adapter, API stands for an application programming interface. And the adapter kind of creates this virtual web server that will respond with HTML, XML, or JSON. That's a very general definition, not even really going into very much detail. I originally kind of thought of it as a bridge in between your authoring tool and your learning management system. But I was talking to somebody else at Trivantis here today, and he made the point that it's more of like having a phone call, because there is a communication that's happening in between the two. Somebody needs to pick up the phone and dial, and it needs to be connected over, and you could be transferred, and you're going to end up going through a process that would require there to be a little bit of input on either side. So it's more like a phone call, because a bridge is too static for us. We need to think more technical. When we talk about SCORM, we're essentially going to be looking at standards that have been put into 3 different categories. So the overarching themes of SCORM include content packaging, or how you put it all together, runtime, which is what is happening when you get into it, and sequencing, which is what you do when you do it in a specific order. Again, this is kind of the highlights reel. There are more things that you can get into. But essentially, content packaging is going to break down into the fact that you need to have a self-sustained directory or archive file, also known as a zip. You're going to need to have a zipped file in order for the learning management system to recognize your authoring tool-based content. Somewhere inside that zipped file is supposed to be an XML file called your IMS manifest XML, or known as the manifest file. It's kind of the godfather if your SCORM folder was a mob boss or a mob organization. It's got all the juicy, good details, and all the secrets are in there. Not really secrets. If you know JavaScript, you can actually read, or XML, you can read it. We automatically do that for you, we being the Royal Trivantis we, and not just me. So you don't need to worry about that, but it is something to note. Within the manifest, the course needs to be divided up into 1 or more parts. So those parts are going to end up being called something called a SCO, or SCO, which stands for a shareable content object. And that is essentially the chunk of your course that is going to be recognized by the learning management system. SCORM and AICC have some overlapping features for it, and when Lectora and Lectora Online works with AICC and SCORM compliance, we actually shoot for AICC, which is why a SCO is going to also be known as an assignable unit. So that is going to, it's essentially the same thing, just different ways for you to be able to communicate, but all reaching the same end goal. So we need to make sure that we have a SCO, or an assignable unit, in our course, and we can have 1 or more of them. When we talk about runtime, this is actually talking about how the content is going to interact once it's been published out. So the content, once published, must be viewed on the web and delivered in a web browser. So the intention of SCORM is your authoring tools, and you're going to be putting it into that learning management system, and the intention is to view that on the web. You can only have one SCO that can be launched at a time. You can have multiple ones in your content, but only one of them can be active. There is a way to add multiple SCOs in, and you can navigate in between one or the other. And you essentially need to tell the system, okay, I'm done with this one, let's for sure move on, so that there's not multiple SCO communications that are going on. Also, once the content has been launched, it must communicate between the e-learning and LMS using JavaScript. Again, it's a communication method and data model, and we're using JavaScript and an API adapter to have that conversation back and forth. So that's really our primary goal here in the back end of our materials. And the last one being sequencing. And sequencing is how you can progress through your course. So you need to allow for navigational control like buttons and menus. You need to specify prerequisites if there are any. You need to make some parts more variable than others, so you can have optional sections and weighted questions, things that may be worth more than the other. You can also make your content randomly available. So for example, randomized tests. And you need to make sure that you're allowing for remediation, which is also a review of that content. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm concerned that if I zoom in my screen anymore, that we will lose any parts of Lectora. This is the most complicated of the pages, but I definitely don't want to leave you guys hanging here. So we might have to switch it back, and I apologize if it's going to be a little jarring or anything, but hopefully that's a little bit better for any of you who are complaining about the sizing. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Metaphorically speaking, more like a common language. Yep, language, communication. I was trying to put that language or communication in the forms of something more technical like a phone, but that's a definite good response to that as well. I am going to be making this presentation available. I can see about adding it to the follow-up email. Otherwise, it will be posted on the community within 24 hours after the session, which is available at community.trivantis.com. One of the questions that was asked is why or when would you have a project with multiple SCOs? And that's a really great question. So there's a couple different approaches that you can take. I'm going to take the general idea of a cooking course. So I know that I want to have a cooking course where the end goal is for my learner to learn how to make spaghetti. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about boiling the water and cooking the pasta, because ain't nobody got time to make spaghetti from scratch, at least not me. So that would be our first SCO, or first part of the project. The next one would then be the sauce. Maybe we do want to make that from scratch, or is it just chucking it from the can into the saucepan? So that would be another SCO for you in your overall cooking project. You could then have the last one be something about assembly, toppings, plating, something that would bring it all together. You could do the same idea in your learning management system, and it would be more like the cooking is your curriculum, and each individual course that you have would be like your courses that you have inside of it. You can do that inside of Lectora if you would like, or you can publish out each one individually as well. When you have multiple SCOs, they all end up transforming into one project, so you wouldn't you would want to focus on not reporting on each individual one and just the general overarching process. So hopefully that explained it a little bit better for you, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's definitely something I did want to talk about. Me personally, I have hardly ever done anything with a multiple SCO project. Most of the time I end up having it set up in my learning management system to just have it where my courses are set up to be taken with prerequisites in that way. But it is available in Inside Authoring Tools as well. Does the requirement to launch in a web browser mean that the content doesn't play well or at all if students are using LMS apps? So it depends on the app that you're talking about. Most applications are going to require web-based delivery. A lot of the times what you'll end up seeing is learning management systems having an offline version of their LMS. And essentially, as soon as they communicate back with the content, it's going to send all that information over afterwards. So I can't speak to any or all LMSs in general, but the intention is for that content to be viewed at some point in time on the web. Ooh, somebody used to build the manifest manually in XML. Ooh, that breaks my little heart. And also, thank you so much for doing that, because I'm sure it wasn't very much fun. Yeah, I'll definitely make sure that I will see what I can do about attaching files as the follow-up for this conversation. I know a lot of you are asking for this. Definitely. So along the same lines as you can do multiple courses inside of a course with the SCO, the question about prerequisites is, can that be something done in the SCORM settings within Lectora? You can set up prerequisites at the SCO level to say that if there are more than one SCOs in here, that they're not allowed to move on to the next one unless the previous one has been completed. You can do that in Lectora, and you can typically usually do it in your learning management system as well. And I'll show you where once we get to that point. We'll be there in just a shake of the lamb's tail. We're going to go ahead and move on from this page. Keep those questions coming if you have any. So essentially, we have a checklist of items that need to either be checked or completed within Lectora, some of them being optional, some of them not. And a lot of this is going to also be relevant for other authoring tools. The first being that you need to enable that you're ready or willing to make this an AICC and SCORM for LMS compliant course. You have the option of creating an additional assignable unit. When you enable, you'll get one to start off with. And I'll explain that process to you, but again, we're not going to focus on multiple AUs or SCOs. That's a whole thing in itself. We'll look at setting the assignable units information, which is where you can set some of the settings that we just discussed in the important things to note page. You also need to make sure that you are properly able to exit the title or close the window. That is a requirement in the sequencing factor. We also need to have some other navigational pieces in there as well, but really the main one is an exit button. We also need to either include a graded test, or if you skip down to a couple, it says, what if I don't have a test? We'll talk about those two things, whether or not you have one or you don't have one, and why you would do one thing over the other. We'll also look at adding in variables that are going to become available to you so you can pull information from your learning management system and plop it into your courses. We'll go through the publishing process from Lectora Online to get this ready for a learning management system, and then we can go ahead and upload it or talk about uploading it as well. So these are all things that we are aiming to accomplish here today. So let's go ahead and start off with enabling AICC and SCORM. So the best practice of doing this is you should always either double check before starting that it is turned on already, or that you have turned it on yourself, or before you go to publish the content that you have enabled Lectora to be AICC and SCORM compliant. It's going to add an assignable unit for you. It's going to give you access to your assignable unit's information. It's going to provide options about adding multiple AUs in there. And it's also going to help when you go to publish with Lectora, because it's going to let you know if there's any errors or warnings that specifically need to be fixed or checked before you're able to continue. So the process of enabling with Inside Lectora is on the design ribbon. There's a title setup group and then the title options button. And from within there, we can swap our title type from a standard one to an AICC and SCORM for LMS. And we would just need to go ahead and confirm that by selecting OK in the window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get into editing the real life version of this course, and we're going to go ahead and turn it on right now. So again, we're going to go up into the design ribbon, which is where you can apply title level design and technical specifications for your course. The title setup section is all the way over to the left-hand side in the first one if you're reading left to right. And here's title options, which is the blue book with the cog icon. And if I click that open, it opens up the title options window for me. From within here, I can change the name, the title type, the language, turn on some settings as well. And from within here, I would definitely need to make sure that this is swapped over to AICC and SCORM for LMS published titles. So before I go ahead and click OK and show you what all this is going to do, I want to quickly address any of the questions that are coming through. If you use multiple SCOs, you return only one score back to the LMS or multiple. When you have multiple SCOs, I know that questions average. Do they have they would have their own information sets. So yes, but I can't remember if they're going to override each other or not. Let me get back to you on that question. If anybody is able to help me with that answer, I'd greatly appreciate it. I want to say no, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, don't work with multiple SCOs all that often, so you've officially kind of reached into my gray area of this knowledge. So let me go ahead. If you have multiple, you can decide how you want them to score. You can decide how you want them to score because there's the information inside of them. I just don't know if they eventually override each one to the point where only the last SCO that you accessed is the one that actually gets shared to the learning management system. I'm also going to put this in as a question to one of our members of staff as well. Mohammed, you're coming to save the day. SCORM is only able to capture one score and one completion per package module or SCO. It's a limitation of the specification. That way the LMS work and interop with content. You might be able to insert scores as interaction variables, but that would require bending of reporting features and use of JavaScript. Beautiful. To capture all three of the scores, you would want to publish them as 3 separate SCOs. So that was my thought process, is if you have multiple ones in there, the last one that you reach is actually going to be the one that's reported. And it's not set up to actually capture each one individually. Thank you for confirming that. Greatly appreciate it. So what happens when we hit OK? The first thing that you're going to notice is over on the left-hand side of the screen, my Title Explorer has kind of changed. I can now see my assignable unit or SCO, which appears as a segregated folder at the top of my Title Explorer. Lectora Desktop doesn't always put it up towards the top, though. Just keep that in mind. And from within it is still all of my course material, which is perfect. So it's just essentially saying that this is really important. This is a package that I need for my LMS to use. So now, therefore, it is packaged up and ready to be configured and sent over once prompted. I'm going to go ahead and pop back into where we were before, which is what's going on now in SCORM. So we've enabled it. We have that assignable unit in there. And I'm going to go ahead and prompt open another question for you. So let me go ahead and put this in, and I'm going to send you guys over another poll. So if you wouldn't mind helping me fill out this knowledge check question, to enable SCORM, navigate to the what ribbon. From the what group do I select what? Go ahead and enter in your questions, or your answers. Questions. Your answers. Help me answer this correctly so we can get that 100% by the end of today's session. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, 1, so we can move around. Let me go ahead and share the results with you. And the answer is, to enable SCORM, navigate to the design ribbon. And from the title options group, title setup group, select title options. I know the answers to my own questions. You guys had it right. Design, title options, and title setup. I even tried to do them in order. So we're good to go from there. You can, of course, create that new AU. Let me go ahead and hide the results. You can go ahead and create or insert multiple AUs into your content. Again, an AU is converted to a SCO if you're publishing to SCORM, because that's that standard, and AU is more for AICC. And how you do that is you go into your title location where you want to add it. Maybe it's after the first piece of content, like you're boiling water, making pasta. And then you would go into your home ribbon, and from the add structure group, there is an AU button. And when you enter that in, it will add a new AU in, and you can associate its individual information and essentially develop it as another course. You can also right click in your title explorer. There's a new window or new option that shows up, and from the slide out menu, you can choose assignable unit, and it's also available using Control-0 as well. So I'll go ahead and navigate there just to show you, but like I said, we're not going to be inserting one in. So if I go up into the home ribbon, up at the top of my screen in the add structure group, I can see that the yellow segmented folder is available up there with the name AU. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is to set the AU's information. So the AU is going to have a couple different things that you can put in. You have your system ID, your developer ID, your AU type, description, maximum point score, your mastery score and percentage, and your time limit enable option, as well as prerequisites. And these are all at the SCO level, not even getting into a learning management system quite yet. The two that I've marked in orange are ones that I would recommend that you enter in at bare minimum. The other ones can be helpful for you when working with your learning management system, but unless you know exactly what to put in, I wouldn't recommend doing anything with it. The maximum point score specifies the maximum number of points that a user can receive when completing your title. And we'll figure that out here in just a minute and apply it to our example. The mastery score and percentage is the score that marks the threshold where the user will consider to be passed for the assignable unit. So it's essentially the lowest passing score that you can have. One thing to note is that if you do accidentally leave these things blank, the mastery score is automatically set to 75%, and the maximum point score is set to 100. So if your compliance requirements or company requirements or personal reasons for having a course set to anything other than 75% completion, then you would need to make sure you have that updated. And the maximum point score is going to be set to 100, which means that you would need to always make sure you're developing your tests or questions so that they equal up to 100. So if I go ahead and I get back into my course material, in order to edit the assignable units information, all you need to do is select on it in your Title Explorer. That is going to open up the assignable units contextual ribbon up in the top ribbon area, and we can move over to the information tab. And from here, I can see system ID, developer ID, AU type, and description, the score, the time limit, and the prerequisites. So we need to figure out what our maximum point score is. By default, Lectora brings in every single question in a test with a score of 1. We have a total of 4 or 5? 3. 3 questions that needed to be answered in our test. I made my whole entire course a test so that the knowledge checks would seem seamless. So each one of those is going to be equal to 1. The maximum point score that they can get for this title is 3. That's perfectly fine. It can be anything in between, 0 to 100. Probably wouldn't do 0 unless you want it to pass every single last time that they take it. But in our particular example, we need to have a maximum point score of 3 to reach 100%. Our mastery score, which was mentioned on the course's information, was 100%, so I would need to swap this out from 75 to 100 to meet my development standards for this particular course. So again, you do need to make sure that you're getting into this information at some point in time in development. As soon as you enable it or turn it on or get into your course, and if you know your standards right away, feel free to do so. Otherwise, if you have a checklist that you need to accomplish before everything gets published out, I would include it on there. Go in and check the assignable units information. So based on that, I'm going to go ahead and ask you our final question, which is, at the bare minimum, what should you fill out in your assignable units information? The what and what fields. Go ahead and vote now by participating in the poll, which should be on your screen. Help me pass this test. At a bare minimum, I should fill out the what and what. You know what? I didn't even give you guys the correct answers. That was me. Sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. The first answer was supposed to say the mastery score, not the AU type. The 2 things at a bare minimum that should be filled out in your assignable units information is the maximum point score and the mastery score. I didn't even give you guys one of the options. I apologize. That was me. It's right in the course. It wasn't right in GoToWebinar. I'm a human. Sometimes I make mistakes. I'm sorry. So those 2 items are going to guarantee that you have the proper way of reporting your testing information. So the next thing that we need to do is include an exit in our title as well. Let me go ahead and hide the poll results for you. You have to make sure that they're able to remove themselves from the course material to get back into the learning management system. They don't directly talk to each other. So the best way to do that is with an exit button. So I have an exit button on the top right-hand side of my screen, just a simple X in my blue design bar. However, it's not currently set up to any actions. So I need to go ahead and insert in an action for this. And that action is going to be on mouse click with no delay to go ahead and exit my title or close the window. and boom, I just met that requirement with that one simple step. A lot of the themes and templates that you'll come across, either from us or other providers or something that you have developed internally, will most likely have this action, or maybe even a button triggered action like hitting escape will exit you out of the course as well, but it needs to be in there somewhere. So you do also want to include some type of test within your feature if at all possible. You don't have to have one if you don't want to. It's running. You don't have to have one in your title if you don't want to, but essentially there are two different types of tests you can have. You can have a standard or a randomized. Standard is one where it just straight out the gate comes in. There's no randomization attached to it. So you would need to make sure that you have in there some type of process the test or survey action. And that is going to help you pass over the variable information to your LMS behind the scenes. A randomized test you can also include in your SCORM compliant courses as well. It is a sequencing feature, as we've seen on the important things to note page. You just need to make sure that you select the desired number of pages, either at the title level or the test section in Lectora, in order to meet that requirement. So the default for the AICC score variable is going to be the score that your test received, or an average of multiple tests. And the AICC lesson status is only going to be set if the content is set properly, and it's going to be your responsibility to make sure it's set to what your learning management system expects. A lot of the times I'll go ahead and recommend that even if you think Lectora is doing it correctly, that you go in and you make sure it does by putting in a modify variable action, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Typically, an LMS is going to expect a communication with the value of passed, completed, failed, incomplete, browsed, and not attempted for SCORM 1.2. So those are the words that they're kind of looking for. However, you can also see variations of pass on top of passed and complete on top of completed. Some LMSs go even as far as to making you capitalize the first letter of the word. So you're going to need to know what that value is. And if Lectora is not doing it automatically to the right specification, you're going to need to make sure that you continuously do that for you. We'll get a little bit more into those variable manipulations when we talk about no test. However, we do need to make sure that we have a graded test. That was the point of this page. And in order to make sure that we have a graded test, we need to go into our test properties, to the results ribbon, and we need to make sure that we check the checkbox in the grading section to the left to say grade the test. And the lowest passing score needs to be set and matching what we have in our AU. So this needs to be met with a 100% passing rate. So I need to make sure that not only does this match my AU, but your LMS also might require you to put that in somewhere as well. All three of them need to communicate correctly, otherwise they will cross wires and not work properly. You do also have some variables that are going to be available once you turn on SCORM compliance. I've bolded the ones that are going to be super important for making sure that your course passes, and I've italicized the ones that a lot of instructional designers or e-learning developers like to incorporate into their material. So for example, the lesson status is how to pass over that word that we just mentioned that your LMS needs. And score is how to pass over the score of a test or the average of multiple tests. So if I need to force those in any way, I can use those variables. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. As an instructional designer, I might choose to show the course ID or the GRIS or CP code of my course if it has any relevance to it. I might also have something in there that is tracking the lesson location or where they are in their current location of the title. I might also include their student ID if it's important in a learning management system, or the student's name if I want to personalize my content. It is going to bring in whatever is in the LMS, which might be last name, first name, or first name, last name. And I am going to need to take into consideration the longest name combination available in whatever languages my company is at. There's also the time, where you can see what the total time the user has been into your published title. Some people like to make their learners aware of that information by having a clock running as soon as they open the material somewhere in the course as well. So there are those in there. I've gone ahead and I've said on the course information page, welcome. I'm actually going to specify this to say welcome, student name from the LMS. You can do that by having a text block placeholder on your page. And I'm just going to have this be the student's name. This will automatically pre-populate with information once it's been published into an LMS. I'm going to make sure I name it in my Title Explorer. And I'm going to go ahead and say on the load of this page, add an action to change the contents of that text block to have a variable value of the AICC student name, which is the name in their learning management system. Take into consideration however many characters, syllables, letters you might have in your student's name, and now I'll be able to display that information. There is one thing that you need to keep in mind, is if I go to preview this content in any way, shape, or form, if I am disconnected from the learning management system, it is not going to show. I have to be in there for these SCORM variables to work. So just keep that in mind when you're going through and developing. If you don't have a test, you can also use that variable manipulation to pass over or override the communications that are happening. So if I don't have a test, I would need to include these at a bare minimum. If I do have a test, but it's not sending the right word, then maybe I would want to do that by adding it in. So you would place an action passing or overriding the information in a place where the learner will encounter it. Location is key here. You need to make sure that it happens after the test, on a page that's not a pop-up, and somewhere that they are most definitely going to be navigated to. Because if they're stalled on any other page, that information will not get passed. So for example, I would need to do this after my test. I don't have anything after it, so I would actually need to create something. So I'm going to just quickly add in a chapter afterwards, and I could move my questions. Let's assume that one's going to be the last one that they get on to. Move. Thank you. And then I can go ahead and add and insert in some variables to manipulate that. So what you would do is you would be modifying the variable, either AICC lesson status or score, and you would set it equal to whatever you wanted. So if I needed to do complete instead of completed, then I could do that in there. So you are able to have content that doesn't have testing, or you can pass over your information if you if you want to or need to. The last thing that we're going to briefly talk about is how to publish. You're going to go up into home, and then there's going to be a publish section, and you're going to choose your SCORM methodology. There is a error checking process that happens, and that will look for SCORM compliant things. So if I go ahead and test it right now to go into SCORM, if I were to get anything that was red, that would mean that this course did not meet SCORM compliance. But I have an AU, I have an exit, I have a graded test. So it's essentially fine with the way that I've developed it. It doesn't go into a lot of detail. There's just a couple system checks in there. You would want to use that checklist to make sure you're doing everything possible. When you're going through and you're publishing, you're going to want to make sure you specify your conformance level. And there's going to be some options that you have available to you as well. These are all part of either the runtime or sequencing options that are part of SCORM compliance. So you can definitely use those to your advantage as well. When it comes to talking about uploading into your LMS, there is a variety of steps that you can encounter. So you should always consult with your LMS administrator, vendor, training, and documentation for the most complete information. But a couple things you might want to keep into consideration. All LMSs require that zipped file upload. So you're going to need to either zip it in Lectora or your other authoring tool, or zip it on your desktop before it goes in. All of the content is going to default to launch on a page called A001 index. Sometimes the learning management system makes you point right into it, so you need to keep that in mind. You need to consult with the proper points of contact, what the word is that is needed to pass over that status. And you need to make sure that your conformance level, test score, and the maximum points of scores at a bare minimum match within the fields in between Lectora and your LMS. There could also be other ones, like prompting it open into a new window. Some LMSs allow you to turn that on or off in their own settings as well. Not having certain things matched up will result in a perfectly developed course, but an ill-performing one in a learning management system. So that is kind of SCORM in a nutshell. I'll definitely be sure to continue answering any questions that you have, but we're going to now talk about what the future of SCORM looks like for just a quick second. I mentioned that SCORM 2004 version or fourth edition was last developed in 2009. So what's really been happening after 2009 that is going to mean the future for SCORM or some other specification? And the answer to that is literally everything. Life happened. We started seeing an increase in social learning. There was learning happening both in person, on the web, hybrid methods. You were learning from your peers. There's gamification. There's just all of these different things that are happening that are not only inside of your learning management system, but also sometimes outside of it as well. So what they decided to do is that the overseers, again, I'm generalizing the story for anybody, so don't get too mad because I'm like bringing it way down. But essentially, the overseers of SCORM asked for somebody to come forth and shape the next level of data collection. What that ended up being is the original project known as Project Tin Can, which was later turned into, or more commonly referred to as XAPI, or you can hear it as ZAPI or other words that essentially mean Experience API. They're all the same thing. And it's essentially a way to collect what the modern person is doing no matter what location. So why does it matter? One of the things that we need to keep in consideration is that SCORM has essentially been pushed aside. Nobody's been working on it since 2009. And we're trying to make room for XAPI and CMI5. So it's kind of like, as a developer, ignoring XAPI is like insisting on using MySpace, when there are social media platforms that are relevant and available and supported and allow you to log in to various different programs and all this other stuff. While the nostalgia of SCORM is there, we're all eventually going to run into dead ends. You might have been asked, can I get this information from my learning management system? Can you pull this type of report? And there will eventually come a point in time when the answer is no. I can't explain that functionality, use, or maintenance because of the limited number of data points that SCORM is collecting and the fact that it's only in one location. So what XAPI does is it essentially collects an infinite data point. They're called verbs, and they give you the ability to say, did you visit this website? Did you watch this video on YouTube? Did you download this PDF? Did you read this presentation? Did you take this course? Did you attend this event? Did you earn this certificate? So now we have all of these learning-based verbs that can be used as specifications in a person's learning journey, not just course-to-course movement, but more of a learning in an ecosystem. So essentially, XAPI has 4 layers of improvement beyond SCORM. It goes above and beyond the standards because it has more data points. It combines formal and informal learning inside and outside of an LMS, and it also allows you to easily extract that data, and it really works in the fact that you can use activity streams to help monitor job performance. So it's no longer about learning, it's more about an ecosystem. How are your employees learning? Where are they learning? What are they trying to get to? What is the next level of understanding? It can also be turned into for customer-based or external training. How am I going to train my customers now in the future? What are their anticipated needs? What should be available just in time, or do I need to be providing them with things that don't necessarily do with my company, but maybe would benefit them if they knew about this additional software? So there's lots of different things to take into consideration. Lectora and Lectora Online do currently allow you to publish out to XAPI, and so that is a possibility for you. If you're looking for more information on that, you can stay tuned for webinars, e-blasts, industry blogs, anything along those lines. Maybe we'll have a Inspiration Wednesday here in the future. Before I go ahead and get into strictly questions, just a little note for anyone on the call. If you're a current desktop user or you're not using Lectora, we are running a sale for Lectora Online. It has a new annual price only until the end of the month of $588. So if you want to take advantage of that, please use the code September18, all capital letters, when you're checking out in the store, or you can contact an account representative regarding this sale. It is for existing Lectora desktop users to convert over into Lectora Online, or if you have never or are not currently using Lectora. Please consider taking a look at that. Again, it's only until the end of this month. So I'm going to go ahead and get back into the questions panel, make sure I'm answering anything. Thank you guys so much for staying. If you need to leave, feel free to do so. We greatly appreciate your attendance here today, participation. Thanks for pulling me out of the trenches there for anything that I was not able to answer correctly. So I published using AICC and I have multiple lessons, but SCORM can only have one. No, AICC and SCORM can have multiples. As far as I'm aware for AICC, I know for a fact that SCORM can. So if your user is closing the training without hitting exit, they lose their score. Potentially, if the communication and conversation is not happening when it's supposed to, if they were to remove themselves outside of the content before taking the test, something could potentially not get reported. So a lot of developers have a best practice of having like the first chapter be automatically set to not started or incomplete, and then not until they get into the test do they move the variable over to in progress. So you're actually manually telling the system when to update it if it's not recognizing it. But there is a good possibility that if they get out of it early, there will not be any reporting that happens. Great question that came through. Can SCORM help you track your learner's behavior within an interactivity or course that is hosted, like which button the learner clicks? No, that was one of the main points of XAPI, is that you can now attach these little verbs onto buttons, actions, windows, PDFs, videos, and that allows you to communicate with the learning management system. Right now, a SCORM really only cares about if you've opened it, if you viewed it, if it's in progress, did you complete a test, did you not complete a test. It's all about timing and scoring. It's not about that individual interaction. That's where XAPI goes way above and beyond other things that you'll be able to encounter. I can send you the flyer for the Lectora sale. I'd be happy to do that for you. I'm glad you're interested. Do you have any metrics that track and compare SCORM versus AICC status being submitted to an LMS? It seems that our LMS prefers one over the other. I personally don't. The support team at Trivantis might be able to respond to that better based on like the cases that they've seen come in. But we don't typically keep individual information about LMSs outside of Trivantis. The 588 translates into a one-time price if you purchase everything up front for the promotion. It translates into about a $49 a month price for you to maintain the Lectora online license for that whole entire year. Thank you for asking for clarification. Happy to do so. So although the course is completed, the course displays in progress in LMS. How to complete a course accurately. So that would probably mean that the variable that's being passed over is not the one that you would need. So you would need to do a modified variable action, like I mentioned, changing the AICC lesson status over to a value of the word or words your LMS needs. That should resolve the issue for you. Yeah, XAPI is definitely some interesting stuff, and we'll definitely keep you in contact regarding that. We'll be having lots of things to say coming up, Trivantis, about XAPI and learning record stores and analytics and information and stuff I'm not supposed to be telling you, but I can, because I can tell you. It's okay. I'm not going to get in trouble. I checked first. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you still have any questions, feel free to type them in. I'll make sure anybody who's asking for follow-up in the questions field receives it, pass you over to the proper people that need that. So thank you so much for joining. Happy to have you on the call. Thank you guys. Hopefully you learned something new. Don't forget to tweet it out if you get a chance. Have a great day as well. Hopefully the rest of your week is just as awesome as this hump day has been. Thank you guys for joining. Happy to put this information together if it's going to be beneficial to you guys. We'll see you all later in the next Inspiration Wednesday.